When people talk about the end times, most imagine chaos, wars raging, nations falling, disasters shaking the earth. But Jesus told us something different. He warned repeatedly about a danger that almost no one sees coming. A danger so subtle, so silent, that it moves through churches, homes, and hearts without alarm. He said, "Take heed that no one deceives you." Not, "Watch for the wars." Not, "Watch for the plagues." Not, "Watch for earthquakes." No. He said, "Watch for deception." Because deception doesn't attack from the outside. It enters quietly. From within. It disguises itself as truth. Feels familiar. Feels safe. And slowly, it reshapes the world from the inside out. The invisible enemy. Consider this: a lie can be exposed. A false prophet can be confronted. But deception that wears truth is invisible. It quotes scripture. It preaches love. It celebrates grace. And the most terrifying part? It feels right. It feels righteous. It feels like faith. And when deception wears the language of God, it can enter churches, communities, and even personal devotion undetected. Jesus warned that even the elect are at risk. Not because they are weak, but because deception adapts. It speaks their language. It mimics conviction. And suddenly, what was once firm, becomes negotiable. The slow cooling of love. In Matthew 24, Jesus connects deception to the state of our hearts. Because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Notice, he doesn't say they will stop believing. He doesn't say churches will crumble. He says love will cool. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It seeps in quietly. A little less prayer. A little less obedience. A little less conviction. And over time, devotion becomes routine. Worship becomes habit. Faith becomes identity without surrender. By the time the consequences appear, the drift has already done its work. This is why Jesus emphasized vigilance. Because the greatest threat is spiritual sleep. Not persecution. Not war. Deception as a conquering force. Let's connect this to Revelation. The first seal didn't bring arrows. It didn't bring fire. It brought influence. The same principle applies today. Deception conquers not by force, but by persuasion. It convinces people that compromise is reasonable. It convinces believers that partial obedience is sufficient. It convinces nations that truth is negotiable. And here's the subtle brilliance of it. When people think they are following God, but are actually embracing compromise, they've been conquered without a fight. A generation at risk. Jesus warned that the last generation would see these things unfold. They would witness wars, famines, and earthquakes, and yet miss the greatest danger: spiritual compromise. The world may appear normal, even prosperous. Faith may appear alive. But beneath the surface, conviction is eroding. Obedience is optional. Discernment is fading. It is subtle. Insidious. Invisible. And because most focus on external chaos, they miss the internal collapse. How to identify the deception? So, how do you recognize it? First, look at hearts, not headlines. Ask questions like, is obedience being redefined as optional? Are scripture and truth being selectively applied? Is compromise celebrated as wisdom? Do believers rely on comfort instead of conviction? Second, watch how love and devotion are shifting. When devotion is routine instead of passionate. When worship is habitual instead of heartfelt. When prayer is repetitive instead of surrendered, you may be seeing the subtle signs of deception. Third, measure against scripture, not culture. Because culture will always bend, shift, and normalize compromise. Truth remains constant. Why discernment is critical in the last days? Discernment is more than a spiritual gift. It is a survival skill. Without it, faith can become identity without obedience, love can become routine without conviction, truth can become negotiable without awareness. Jesus warns, this is where many will stumble. Not through persecution, but through the comfort of partial truth. Climactic reflection. Imagine a generation that prays, worships, sings, quotes scripture, yet fails to recognize the compromise creeping into hearts. They believe they are standing firm, while quietly drifting towards spiritual irrelevance. That is the true conquest of the end times. It is invisible. It is silent. It is persuasive. And it has already begun. The call to action. Jesus said, "Stay awake." Not because the world is falling apart, but because hearts can fall asleep. Not because disasters will scare us, but because deception will numb us. Stay alert. Stay discerning. Stay surrendered. Ask yourself daily, am I embracing comfort over conviction? Am I conforming to culture rather than scripture? Am I spiritually awake, or asleep? Because when deception takes root in believers, influence spreads faster than disasters ever could. If this message stirred something in you, take a moment, not to react, but to reflect. Return to scripture. Sit with what you've heard. Ask God for clarity, wisdom, and discernment. And if you believe these teachings are needed in a world growing more confused, consider sharing this message with someone you care about. Truth spreads best when it's shared thoughtfully. The world may be quiet, but the greatest threat is already moving. The next message reveals which generation Jesus warned about, and why it matters now. Watch this video to continue. Only a remnant will stand, the hidden biblical test most Christians are failing. The Bible never calls us to fear the last days. It calls us to remain faithful within them. We were never promised an easy road, but we were promised that God would never leave us. As the world grows louder and more uncertain, may your faith grow quieter, deeper, and more anchored in truth. Thank you for spending this time in reflection and scripture. Until next time, remain watchful, remain grounded, and walk faithfully in the light you've been given.